Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 737. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, a funny thing happened on the way to this week's Software Process and Measurement Cast. I was asked a question about managing risk in Agile. In preparation for answering the question, I reviewed and updated some of my work on the topic. So instead of flow metrics this week, we have an essay on risk. That's just the chance you take when you ask me a question. Note, I have a great question on risk to ask Susan Parente at TechRisk Manager on Twitter the next time we record. We also have a visit from Tony Timble. Tony discusses Agile requirements in an installment of his To Tell a Story column. Check out Tony at tonytimble.com. Adaptability Requires Comfort with Uncertainty by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. In most organizations, software development maintenance is not a solitary activity. Even a relatively simple enhancement requires the involvement of multiple roles to identify, translate, and implement an idea. Teams are the tool used to effectively gather and coordinate all the needed roles into one place. While it's easy to perceive the team as a monolithic unit, every individual on the team is a decision-making machine. Every person will have a different tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity, which will affect how they make decisions. In 1983, Gert Hofstede published a paper titled National Cultures in Four Dimensions. The paper introduced the idea of the Uncertainty Avoidance Index to explain behavioral differences between nations. The theories espoused by Dr. Hofstede illustrate that different cultures react to uncertainty differently. Organizations and teams inside organizations also have a different tolerance for uncertainty. While the factors that influence how avoidant of uncertainty any organization or team is probably is far more complex than natural cultures. What is important is that we understand that some organizations and teams will avoid uncertainty more vociferously than others. In software development, how work is done is often a reflection of differing approaches and needs to reduce the anxiety generated by uncertainty. Software development organizations that are highly avoidant of uncertainty exhibit many of the following attributes: structure and rules focus. Development processes are spelled out at a high level of granularity and are often augmented by informal norms and rules. Changing the process is formally evaluated and improved. 2. Roles and individuals are conflated. The individual plays a specific role and is expected to have a high degree of expertise in that role, which makes them required participants for decisions that impact the role. 3. Consensus decision-making is used to increase the knowledge base for any specific decision while distributing responsibility and accountability. Consensus decision-making often increases the required energy to generate a specific decision. 4. Life is hectic. I don't think that surprises anybody. Significant amounts of energy are required to continuously monitor the flow of work and decisions being made that could possibly affect the work being performed. Excuse me while I check my email and Slack and Teams on my iPhone during a meeting. Presence suffers by the life is hectic problem. Organizations and teams whose work and products impact health and safety often fall into this category. The people that work in these environments must be comfortable with this form of structure. Organizations that have less tolerance for uncertainty will gravitate toward frameworks and methods that provide them a level of structure that reduces uncertainty. DSDM, safe, and more structured approaches are often used in organizations in which uncertainty generates anxiety. The reaction any team or organization has to uncertainty will be different, which is why there is no one perfect framework or method for delivering value. Highly structured approaches will appeal to some organizations, while less structured approaches will appeal to others. While these are just two poles on a continuum, my observation is that most organizations tend to live closer to one end or the other rather than the center. That makes using the wrong approach in an organization tantamount to two teams playing football together, one using the rules from the NFL, National Football League here in the States, and the other playing by the rules of the Canadian Football League. The results, probably humorous, but the results would cause a lot of tension and anxiety on the field. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com. We look forward to the conversations. We embrace uncertainty in those conversations. Tony Timble, welcome back to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Awesome. I love these times together. We get so excited talking about requirements, and you ask such great questions.
Tony, well, that's only because you have such great content. So
Thank you.
The love fest continues. Tony, last month on To Tell a Story, we talked about a process of bridging between the empire and the waterfall requirements process and bridging that gap into incremental development, into Agile. We sort of stopped when we ran into the whole idea that we might have to have something that keeps that process synchronous so that we don't end up having two parallel paths that sometimes talk to each other. How do you keep that synchronized?
So that's a great question. So when we talked last month about the requirements delay and the requirements bridging the gap between waterfall processes and agile processes, right? We introduced the concept of incremental requirements development that would be synchronized with incremental software development, right? What happens is once you start talking the business into this process, and there's an onboarding way and technique in which we do that in the ebook, we talk about how to onboard an agile requirements business team and how you train them on agile processes. And these are business people whose work product is not code, it's IP, it's intellectual property. So once you begin that training process and mindset shift, the business begins to realize that they actually have a requirements pipeline. They understand, we have a pipeline of turning ideas into requirements. And that pipeline has a natural flow left to right over time, right? It's very similar to a software development pipeline, which turns scope into code left to right over time. And so the idea is once you begin to implement the epic description statement that is the bridge between waterfall business requirement development and incremental software development, then the pipelines become naturally synchronized. You have a discussion about when you deliver or hand off incremental requirements to the teams for their early review and consumption and feedback, so that the organization becomes just a more in-depth learning organization. They're learning about each other's ideas, they learn about each other's context and perspectives, and that just helps everybody. So that's how those pipelines become synchronized, is that the two organizations realize that their pipelines are complementary to each other, and you synchronize them at particular what we call sync points, cadence sync points. And those sync points are really at the discretion of the organization. When do you do that? Do you do it if you're in a safe model at the program increment boundary? Do you do that if you're non-safe at iteration planning boundaries? That's really at the discretion of the business.
Do you think that your premise, and that is that the business creates epic statements, creates their own requirements pipeline, do you somehow think that that's real, or
Is it an artifact of some highly developed, mature organizations, or is it for the rest of us sort of like rainbows and unicorns?
I think they don't know it. It's unconscious. They don't know that they have a requirements pipeline. I would bet most organizations don't. The ones I'm working at don't. And so what you have to do is part of, any transformation process or any part of consulting process, you have to basically say, hey, wake up. You have a requirements pipeline, whether you recognize it or not. You have one. Now, whether you want that to be an efficient pipeline that becomes synchronized with your incremental development partners, that's up to you. But you have a pipeline. Now, whether that pipeline is run well or not, that's up to you. So what the Agile ebook, Agile Requirements Readiness ebook does, it helps you understand how to make that unrecognized requirements pipeline more, not only recognized, but also more efficient and optimized and synchronized with the software development pipeline.
So who really does own that pipeline, that requirements pipeline? And own, I mean staff it and actually manage it. Is that the business, or do they proxy it out to a whole bunch of BAs that do it part-time from the IT side?
That's a challenge for organizations. It should be staffed from the business side. It should be managed on the business side by the product management function, right? And so that should also own product owners, right? So product owners and product managers are the key enablers of an efficient requirements pipeline operation. When they outsource that to IT because they don't want to be involved, that breaks down the process. That creates delay in the area of communication, because now you've got what we call IT product owner or proxy product owners that really can't make prioritization or business decisions because they're IT people. That is an anti-pattern that arises. So a lot of organizations, as far as, our recommendation is the organization should recognize their requirements pipeline and begin to professionalize its management, because one, you're spending a lot of time and money developing ideas and scope, and you want to make sure you hand it off at optimum points, just like a relay race, right? When you watch relay races in the Olympics, you groan when the handoff of the baton falls on the ground.
Not if it's a team that I don't like. Then I
That's
don't
true.
groan. I go, yay! Oh, sorry.
Right. But watching the baton fall on the ground is the metaphor for when the business and IT don't hand off requirements effectively.
But Tony, we always had BAs in IT. Does that mean I have to rip them out and put them over in business? Do I have to get more people on the business side? Why can't I just do what I've always done? And heck, I've been in business for 50 years.
So you could keep everything in place, but once you start down this process, it will change the way you think about roles and responsibilities and how those roles and responsibilities are fulfilled, right? So it may be that you can keep the BAs on the IT side, or maybe you want to pull them all over to the business side, or you want to make them a dotted line or cross-functional team. I think there are many different ways in which you can get to the end state. I think every organization is different. Our best practice recommendation is that, business content authority really resides on the business. For them to become a good partner with IT, they have to assume those responsibilities, not just send over requirements over the transom, over the wall, and then blame IT when things don't work. The business has to become a partner with IT. And this incremental requirements development model that we have really helps the business become a better partner with IT.
I do think the word partner is important. And I think that as long as the person that is the partner is not part of the organization they're representing, I don't know that can work. So that whole dotted line and keeping it in IT, I think that's, I think there are organizations that might be able to pull that off, but I think that's probably an organizational cop-out.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Tony, how would people continue the conversation? How would they find out about the ebook, find out about Tony Timble, read his blog? How would they go about doing that stuff?
TonyTimble.com. Read the blog posts I've had on these items, and join our Agile Requirements Mastery newsletter, which you'll get the ebook for free.
Super. Tony, it's been absolutely fantastic. Until next month, it'll probably be snowing by then, at least in the upper latitudes of the United States. So I don't think it snows very much where you are.
Yeah, it doesn't. Sunny days.
Sunny days. All right, Tony, absolutely fantastic. Thank you again for spending time with the Software Process and Measurement Cast listeners.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell the story. Thank you.
In Reread Saturday News, this week we tackle chapters 8 and 9. These chapters of Extraordinary Badass Agile Coaching are titled An Agile Coaching Story, Part 1 and Part 2. They're written by Mark Summers and provide great advice on how to prepare and execute coaching events. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, Luis Gonçalves is back to discuss his new book. Luis and I had a great time talking about shifting from projects to product thinking, organizational mastery, and more. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?